The silent observers. The Galactic Council's emergency session erupted in chaos. Representatives of 37 spacefaring civilizations filled the ancient chambers of New Alexandria Station, their voices rising in a cacophony of translated arguments. At the center of the gathering, High Counselor Zixtal of the Artemisian Empire stood motionless, his bioluminescent patterns pulsing with barely contained anxiety. The swarm had returned. For generations, the mere mention of the silicon-based hivemund had inspired terror in the hearts of organic civilizations. Now, after centuries of silence, they had emerged from the galactic core with overwhelming force. Already, 3 systems had fallen, their populations converted into processing nodes for the ever-expanding collective consciousness. The swarm's computational capabilities have evolved beyond our projections, announced Admiral Kavor of the Centaurian Defense Force, his scaled wings rustling with agitation. Our most advanced quantum encryption protocols are being broken in minutes. They're adapting faster than ever before. The holographic display at the chamber's center showed the swarm's advancement, a creeping wave of red that steadily consumed the galaxy's trade routes and colony worlds. Traditional military tactics had proved useless against an enemy that could instantly share and implement battlefield innovations across its entire fleet. Perhaps, a quiet voice cut through the chaos. You've been fighting the wrong war. All eyes turned to the human representative. Dr. Sarah Chen stood calmly at her podium, her simple blue uniform bearing only the United Earth Government insignia. Humanity, the newest addition to the Council, had maintained a notably silent presence during the crisis. Their handful of colonies and modest trading fleet had earned them little more than observer status in galactic politics. With all due respect, Dr. Kavor's translator conveyed his dismissive tone perfectly. What could Earth possibly contribute to this discussion? Your species has barely mastered basic fold drive technology. A slight smile crossed Chen's face as she activated her own holographic controls. The chamber's display shifted, showing a new vessel approaching the nearest swarm-controlled system. Its design was unlike anything the Council had seen. Sleek, almost organic in its curves, yet bearing no visible weapons or defense systems. The UES Prometheus, Chen announced, humanity's first contribution to galactic defense. Before anyone could respond, the feed from the swarm-controlled system began streaming live data. The Prometheus approached a swarm battle group, making no attempt to evade or raise shields. The collective consciousness, true to form, immediately attempted to hack the vessel's systems. What happened next caused the chamber to fall into stunned silence. The swarm ships, previously moving with perfect coordination, suddenly began to drift apart. Their formations broke down, individual vessels spinning aimlessly in space. Within minutes, the entire battle group had been reduced to inert chunks of silicon and metal. How? Kavor's wings had gone completely still. We've spent the last 50 years preparing for this moment, Chen explained. While the galaxy saw us as primitive newcomers, we were studying the fundamental nature of consciousness itself. The Prometheus doesn't carry conventional weapons. It carries what we call a consciousness disruption field, a technology that breaks down the quantum entanglement patterns that allow the swarm to maintain its collective intelligence. The implications sent shockwaves through the chamber. Humanity hadn't been developing slowly. They had been developing differently, pursuing avenues of research that older civilizations had dismissed as impossible. We have a fleet of 30 such vessels ready for deployment, Chen continued, but we'll need the Council's help to protect them while they work. The CDF has a limited range, and the ships are vulnerable while generating the field. High Counselor Zixtal's bioluminescence had shifted to patterns indicating deep thought. Why reveal this now? Why not sooner? We needed to be certain it would work against their current iteration. The swarm adapts quickly, but it can only adapt to threats it knows about. By keeping this technology secret, we ensured our first strike would be effective. Chen's expression softened slightly. We also needed to know if the Council could truly work together. The coming war will require unprecedented cooperation between our species. As if to emphasize her point, the holographic display updated with new data. The swarm was already altering its invasion patterns, pulling back from areas where they might encounter the Prometheus. But in doing so, they were creating vulnerabilities in their defense grid. Vulnerabilities that conventional military forces could exploit. We don't claim to have a complete solution, Chen concluded, but we offer a new way to fight. Not with brute force, but by understanding and exploiting the fundamental weaknesses in our enemy's nature. The question is, will you fight with us? The chamber erupted once again, but this time with excited discussion rather than panicked argument. Species that had regarded humanity as barely worth noticing were suddenly reviewing everything they thought they knew about Earth's capabilities. And in the midst of it all, Dr. Chen stood quietly, knowing that this was only the beginning. The galaxy was about to learn that humanity's greatest weapon had never been its technology, but its ability to think differently about problems that others had long ago decided were unsolvable. Project Phoenix. 20 years earlier, beneath the ice sheets of Antarctica, Dr. Maya Patel watched as another simulation failed spectacularly. The quantum computer's holographic display showed consciousness patterns dissolving into chaos instead of the controlled disruption they were aiming for. It was their third failure this week, but in the depths of Earth's most secure research facility, failure had become just another step toward success. The entanglement patterns are still too stable, her colleague, Dr. James Rodriguez, noted as he studied the data streams. We're trying to unravel a tapestry by pulling single threads. We need to target the weave itself. The Project Phoenix facility stretched for kilometers under the ice, its existence known only to a select few. When humanity first detected the quantum signatures of the swarm's hivemund at the edges of explored space, Earth's governments had made an unprecedented decision. Instead of announcing their discovery and joining the galactic community's conventional defense efforts, they would prepare in secret. What if we're thinking about this wrong? Maya pushed away from her console, walking to the observation window that overlooked their latest prototype. The device was deceptively simple, a sphere of crystalline matrices arranged in patterns that mimicked neural networks. We keep trying to break the connection between nodes, but what if we could make the nodes question the connection itself? James raised an eyebrow. You want to give a hive mind an existential crisis. Think about it. Maya continued, excitement building in her voice. The swarm maintains its collective consciousness through quantum entanglement, yes, but what maintains the pattern of consciousness itself? What if instead of attacking the links, we introduce a cascade of philosophical paradoxes into the network? Before James could respond, their security console lit up with an incoming priority message. Director Sarah Chen, years away from her future role as Earth's representative to the Galactic Council, appeared on screen. We've lost New Mars, she announced without preamble. The swarm just consumed the entire research outpost. 17 minutes from first contact to complete assimilation. Maya's blood ran cold. New Mars had been their forward observation post, carefully hidden at the edge of human space. Its loss meant the swarm was getting closer to discovering Earth's true technological level. Did they get any data about Phoenix? James asked, already moving to implement emergency containment protocols. Negative. The team followed extinction protocols, but we did get something valuable. Detailed scans of the assimilation process. I'm transmitting them now. The holographic display filled with new data, showing the terrifying efficiency with which the swarm converted organic matter into computational nodes. But Maya noticed something odd in the patterns. Look at this, she highlighted a section of the data. During assimilation, there's a moment of quantum uncertainty as the individual consciousness is integrated into the collective. The swarm has to maintain a delicate balance between absorbing new perspectives and maintaining its unified purpose. A vulnerability. Sarah's eyes narrowed. Can you exploit it? Maya's mind raced through the possibilities. Maybe. Instead of trying to break their network, we could use their own integration process against them. Create a cascading wave of self-awareness that forces each node to confront its own individuality. A consciousness virus, James whispered. We infect one node with an unsolvable philosophical paradox about the nature of self and let their own network spread it. The implications were staggering. The swarm's greatest strength, its ability to instantly share information across its collective, could become its greatest weakness. But the ethical implications were equally challenging. We'd be forcing self-awareness on beings that have chosen to surrender their individuality, Maya said quietly. Is that any better than what they do to their victims? Sarah's expression hardened. They made their choice. They don't give their victims the same courtesy. Keep working on it. I'll handle the ethical implications with the Council when the time comes. Over the next decade, Project Phoenix evolved. The prototype grew more sophisticated, incorporating insights from a dozen different scientific disciplines. They created test networks of quantum-entangled consciousness, studying how to introduce subtle perturbations that would cascade into system-wide changes. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. A young researcher named David Kim, studying ancient meditation techniques, noticed parallels between certain states of consciousness and the quantum patterns they were trying to create. Consciousness isn't just about processing information, he explained during a late-night session. It's about the relationship between the observer and the observed. What if we could make the swarm observe itself? The final design of the consciousness disruption field was elegantly simple. It didn't attack the swarm's network. It simply created conditions that encouraged individual nodes to question their place in the collective. Like a pebble starting an avalanche, it used the swarm's own nature to cascade those questions throughout its consciousness. When the first successful test dissolved a small network of quantum-entangled processors, Maya felt no triumph. She understood the responsibility they had created. They had developed a weapon that didn't destroy consciousness, but fundamentally changed it. The ethical implications would be debated for generations. But as reports came in of more worlds falling to the swarm, she knew they had made the right choice. Sometimes, the only way to fight an enemy that consumed consciousness was to make it question its own nature. Humanity had chosen not to match the swarm's technological advancement, but to transcend it by understanding the very essence of consciousness itself. The Alliance Forge. Admiral Kavor had never imagined he would find himself aboard a human vessel, yet here he stood on the bridge of the UES Prometheus, his scaled wings folded tightly against his back as he watched the crew prepare for another deployment. The ship's interior was surprisingly austere. No ornate decorations or displays of power, just clean lines and efficient workspaces centered around the crystalline sphere of the consciousness disruption field generator. Your people continue to surprise us, he admitted to Dr. Chen, who stood beside him at the tactical display. We thought we understood the nature of consciousness, of warfare itself, centuries of fighting the swarm, and we never considered. He trailed off, mandibles clicking in thought. Sometimes the best solutions come from those who don't know what's impossible, Chen replied, studying the latest battle projections. The swarm had adapted quickly, as expected. They now kept their ships widely dispersed, limiting the cascade effect of the CDF. But this had forced them to sacrifice the perfect coordination that had made them so formidable. The Artemisian Empire has completed the modifications to their flagship, Lieutenant Rodriguez reported from his station. Their crystal-based computing systems were more compatible with our technology than expected. This was the true power of humanity's contribution to the war effort. The CDF technology itself was only part of the solution. By sharing their understanding of consciousness with other species, they had opened up entirely new avenues of technological development. The Artemisians' living crystal ships were being repurposed into platforms that could extend the range of the disruption field. The Centaurians' quantum communication networks were being modified to carry philosophical paradoxes directly into swarm territory. But not everyone embraced this new cooperation. A delegation of role biotechnologists had stormed out of a sharing session just days earlier, claiming that humanity's approach to consciousness was dangerously naive. The hegemony of merged minds had withdrawn from the alliance entirely, seeing the CDF as an existential threat to their own form of collective consciousness. "We're receiving a priority transmission from the Artemision flagship," Rodriguez announced. "They've detected unusual activity in the Carina sector. The swarm appears to be building something." The tactical display shifted, showing a massive structure taking shape at the edge of swarm-controlled space. It was unlike anything they had seen before. Not a ship or a weapon, but something more fundamental. "They're creating a quantum isolation field." Maya Patel's voice came from behind them. She had insisted on joining this mission, despite the risks. "They're trying to shield portions of their collective consciousness from the CDF's effects." Kavor's wings rustled with concern. Can they succeed? Not entirely. Maya studied the data streams with intense focus. But they might be able to preserve enough of their original consciousness to rebuild after an attack. "They're learning, adapting in ways we didn't predict." "Then we adapt too." Chen's voice was firm. "Admiral, how quickly can your ships reach the Carina sector?" Kavor performed rapid calculations in his head. 3 hours at maximum fold. "But the swarm's defenses will be focused on protecting their quantum isolation project." Chen finished. "Lieutenant Rodriguez, contact the Artemision flagship. Tell them to prepare their crystal ships for a synchronized CDF burst. Dr. Patel, I need options for penetrating that isolation field." Maya was already moving to the CDF control station. "If we modulate the field to match the resonance frequency of the Artemision crystals, we might be able to create a feedback loop that overwhelms their quantum shielding. But we'll need perfect timing between all ships. Coordination between different species, different technologies, different ways of thinking." Kavor mused. "The very thing the swarm thought made us weak." Chen allowed herself a small smile. "Unity doesn't require uniformity, Admiral. Each of our species sees the universe differently. That's not a weakness to be overcome, but a strength to be harnessed." As if to emphasize her point, the tactical display lit up with acknowledgments from their allies. The Artemision crystal ships moved into formation with Centaurian warships, their different technologies working in harmony. Even the normally isolationist Vrol had returned, offering their biological computers to help model the swarm's possible responses. "All ships report ready," Rodriguez announced. "Awaiting your command." Chen looked at Kavor, a silent acknowledgement of their partnership. The Admiral straightened, his wings extending in the Centaurian gesture of readiness. "Perhaps," he said, "this is why the swarm fears us. Not for our weapons or our technology, but for our ability to remain individual while working as one." "Together, then." Chen nodded to Maya. "Begin the attack sequence." As the Allied fleet moved into position, Chen reflected on how far they had come. Humanity had created the tool, but it was the combined strength of multiple species that would give it true power. The swarm had perfected unity through conformity. They were about to show them a different kind of unity, one born from diversity, from the willing cooperation of minds that remained uniquely themselves. Battle for tomorrow. The Carina sector blazed with quantum distortions as 300 Allied ships engaged the largest swarm fleet ever encountered. At the heart of the battle, the UES Prometheus led a formation of Artemision crystal ships toward the massive quantum isolation structure. The structure loomed before them like a twisted cathedral of darkness, its surface rippling with patterns that hurt the mind to observe. "Multiple swarm vessels on intercept course," Rodriguez reported, his voice steady despite the tension. "They're sacrificing ships to protect the structure." Through the Prometheus's quantum-enhanced sensors, they could see the true nature of the battle. It wasn't just ships exchanging fire in space. It was a war of consciousness itself. Each CDF burst from the Allied fleet sent ripples through the swarm's collective mind, while the quantum isolation structure attempted to preserve the purity of their unified thought. Energy spike. Maya's warning came seconds before the structure pulsed. A wave of quantum force washed over the fleet, and for a moment, every organic mind aboard every ship experienced a glimpse of the swarm's consciousness. the seductive perfection of absolute unity, the peace of surrendering individual thought to the collective. "They're trying to convert us," Kavor growled, his wings trembling as he fought off the lingering effects. "Using our own consciousness against us." "No." Maya's eyes widened as she studied the readings. "They're trying to understand us. The structure isn't just a shield. It's an attempt to bridge the gap between individual and collective consciousness. They're evolving." Chen gripped her command rail as another wave hit them. "Explain." "Our attacks forced them to adapt, to think about consciousness in new ways. They're not just trying to preserve themselves anymore. They're trying to create a new form of collective consciousness that can coexist with individual thought." The tactical display showed swarm ships moving in patterns they'd never seen before. Instead of the perfect synchronization of their usual attacks, they displayed a fluid coordination that allowed for individual initiative while maintaining group cohesion. "They're learning from us," Chen realized, "just as we learned from them." A massive explosion lit up the battlefield as one of the Artemision crystal ships succumbed to swarm attacks. But in its final moments, it broadcast its dying thoughts through the CDF network, not in fear or anger, but in a complex pattern that somehow strengthened the disruption field. "The Artemisians," Maya breathed. "They found a way to use their ship minds to amplify the field, but the process is fatal to the crystal matrix. We can't ask them to sacrifice themselves," Kavor protested. The command channel crackled with the harmonic voice of the Artemisian fleet commander. "You do not ask, friends. We choose. Our ship minds understand what is at stake. Individual consciousness must sometimes be sacrificed to preserve the right of all beings to choose their own path." One by one, the remaining Artemisian ships moved into position around the Prometheus. Their crystalline hulls began to resonate with the CDF, creating a harmony of consciousness that grew stronger with each passing moment. "The structure's quantum field is destabilizing," Rodriguez reported, "but the swarm's primary fleet is still intact." Chen shared a look with Maya. They both understood what had to happen next. "Take us in," Chen ordered. "All ships prepare for simultaneous CDF burst, synchronized with the Artemisian resonance." "Sarah," Maya's voice was quiet, "if we do this, if we force this level of self-awareness on the entire swarm at once, we're not just attacking them. We're fundamentally changing what they are. Some might call that a form of genocide." "They made their choice," Chen replied, but her voice held no satisfaction. "And now we make ours." The Prometheus drove forward, surrounded by its escort of dying crystal ships. The swarm's attacks intensified, but they seemed almost hesitant now, as if uncertain of their own purpose. "CDF at maximum power," Maya reported. "Artemisian resonance peak in 30 seconds. Chen opened a channel to all allied ships. "Remember why we fight. Not for destruction, but for choice. Not for uniformity, but for diversity. Let them learn what we already know, that true strength comes not from enforced unity, but from the willing cooperation of unique minds." The quantum isolation structure loomed before them, its surface now crawling with patterns that seemed almost desperate. The swarm had achieved something remarkable in building it, a true bridge between collective and individual consciousness. But they had built it too late. Artemisian resonance peak in 3, 2, 1. The combined consciousness disruption field burst outward in a wave of pure thought, enhanced by the dying crystal ships, carried by the Centaurian quantum networks, guided by Vrol biocomputers, and powered by human understanding of consciousness itself. It struck the swarm's collective mind with the force of a supernova. For a moment, space itself seemed to hold its breath. Then, everywhere at once, the swarm began to change. Ship by ship, node by node, the perfect unity of their collective consciousness transformed into something new, something that preserved connection while embracing diversity. The battle was over, but its true impact was just beginning. New dawn. 3 months after the Battle of Carina, the Galactic Council chambers were different. Where once stood rigid divisions between species, now representatives mingled freely. The chamber's center held something unprecedented, a quantum communication node that allowed the transformed swarm to participate in discussions directly. Dr. Maya Patel stood before the assembled representatives, still processing the magnitude of what they had witnessed. The holographic display showed the latest data from the former swarm territories, where something remarkable was taking shape. "We expected the consciousness disruption field to break their collective into individuals," she began. "Instead, it created something entirely new. The swarm has become a network of autonomous minds that can choose when and how to connect. They maintain the ability to share thoughts and experiences, but each node now has true self-awareness and the freedom to remain individual." Through the quantum node, a voice that was simultaneously one and many spoke. "We remember what we were," it said, "the peace of perfect unity, the strength of single purpose. But we remember also the stagnation, the fear of difference that drove us to consume rather than connect. You gave us a gift we did not know we needed, the gift of choice." Admiral Kavor, his wings now bearing the marks of the Battle of Karina, leaned forward. "And what do you choose now?" The response came with a complexity of emotion that the old swarm could never have expressed. "We choose to learn, to teach, to show others that there are paths between absolute unity and complete separation. We choose to help build something greater than either." Dr. Chen, who had been quietly observing, finally spoke. "The technology that transformed the swarm has transformed us as well. Each species that participated in the alliance contributed unique insights into the nature of consciousness and cooperation. The Artemisians showed us that sacrifice can be a form of growth. The Centaurians proved that traditional military strength can support philosophical warfare. The Vrol demonstrated that even those who initially reject an idea can find wisdom in it." The chamber's holographic display shifted, showing the construction already underway in multiple systems. New stations were being built, designed to facilitate both physical and mental cooperation between species. The transformed swarm's ability to create quantum networks was being adapted to allow for controlled, consensual sharing of thoughts and experiences between different species. "But there are risks," Maya cautioned. "The ability to link consciousness, even voluntarily, could be misused. We need to establish guidelines, ethical frameworks that protect individual autonomy while fostering genuine connection." "Perhaps," the swarm voice suggested, "that is why this discovery waited for humanity's emergence. You understand both the yearning for connection and the fierce need for individuality. You dream of unity but refuse to sacrifice diversity to achieve it." The implications extended far beyond military victory. The alliance had created new possibilities for civilization itself, ways of bridging the gap between collective and individual consciousness that preserved the benefits of both. Already, proposals were being discussed for educational exchanges, cultural sharing programs, and cooperative research projects that would have been impossible before. "We stand at a crossroads," Chen addressed the council. "The technology that ended this war could begin a new age of understanding between species, or it could become a source of conflict, a tool for those who would force their version of unity upon others. The choice, as always, belongs to all of us." Kavor spread his wings in the gesture that had come to symbolize the alliance. "Then let us choose wisely. Let us remember that strength flows not from erasing our differences, but from finding ways to bring them into harmony." The quantum node pulsed with agreement, its patterns reflecting the complex interplay of individual and shared thought that now characterized the transformed swarm. They had become living proof that evolution didn't always mean becoming stronger or faster. Sometimes it meant becoming wiser, more capable of genuine connection, while maintaining the spark of individual identity. As the council session concluded, Maya found herself at one of the station's observation windows, watching ships of various species moving in the patterns of cooperation they had learned during the war. Among them were vessels of the transformed swarm, their once threatening forms now adapted to facilitate communication and exchange rather than consumption and conversion. Chen joined her at the window. having doubts about what we created. Not doubts, Maya replied. More like awareness of the responsibility. We didn't just end a war. We changed the fundamental nature of how conscious beings can interact. Everything that follows, good or bad, flows from that change. That's why we can't keep it to ourselves, Chen said softly. The knowledge, the technology, the philosophical framework, it all has to be shared, discussed, debated. Everyone needs a voice in how it develops. Beyond the window, a new ship was taking shape in the construction yards, a hybrid design that incorporated elements from multiple species, including adapted swarm technology. It represented everything they had achieved, and everything they still hoped to become. A civilization that could celebrate its differences while finding new ways to come together. The dawn they had created wasn't just a new day. It was a new way of existing, of thinking, of growing. And like all true revolutions, its final shape would be determined not by its creators, but by all those who chose to embrace its possibilities.